Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining. We're starting a few minutes early to allow people to join in. Please let us know where you're joining us from. Let us know in the chat, making sure you have your chat function working here. And so we'll get started here in the next 2 minutes. Again, thank you all for joining. We're excited to be sharing with you, especially from our guest speakers tonight. So again, let us know where you're coming from, what chapter you're representing, and we look forward to getting started soon.
Just checking, are you guys seeing anything in the chat? No, okay.
Nope.
All righty, we are now live. Good evening, Ship Familia. Welcome to the latinXfactor Sharpen Your Professional Edge program. My name is Brianne Martin. I'm the Senior Manager of Membership here at Ship National. Tonight, I'm incredibly excited to welcome our guest panelists. They are the leaders of the Engineering Change Lab USA, and we're incredibly excited to have them talk to us about the future of engineering today. Thank you, Amy and Mike, for both spending your evening with the Ship Familia here tonight. Would you mind giving us a little background about each of you and how you got to where you are today?
Sure, thanks, Brianne, and we appreciate the opportunity to be here. I'm Mike McMeekin. I am the Executive Director of Engineering Change Lab, but before taking on this role, I spent a long time, we don't need to know how many years, in consulting civil engineering, and I'm happy to move into this role. And I'm presenting today from Omaha, Nebraska.
All right, and I'm very glad to be here. I'm Amy Squitieri. My regular job is a group leader and innovation program manager at Mead & Hunt, which is a top 100 AE firm. And I am normally based in Madison, Wisconsin, but I'm a little further north than that today, about 4 hours north of there, pretty much as far north as you can go in the US. So could almost see Canada from here, but not quite, and really excited to be here today.
Well, thank you both for joining us. It's exciting. We have familia all over the nation as well, so excited to have representation with even just our panelists as well. For those attending here in the chat, you are in listen-only mode, so those of you that are joining us, feel free to utilize the chat here on the right-hand side of the bar. You can see that chat function. Feel free to hit that little arrow. Let us know if you have questions along the way. Amy and Mike will both be hopping in the chat and being able to answer your questions as they go along, as well as a lot of great content to be presented tonight. So without further ado, I'll let you both take it away. Thank you.
All right, I want to take care of a little business. Amy, one of our associates, Clint Robinson, just texted me to send him the link to the presentation. Could you do that while I get started talking?
Yes, I will do that.
All right, thank you. Well, again, we're glad to be here, and we want to let you know that we have attempted to make this workshop as interactive as possible. There's going to be several times where we're going to specifically ask for your input and your thoughts through chat, but we would welcome other comments on chat at any time as we present. So let's get going here. We live in a world that is facing an unprecedented wave of technological change. The author Klaus Schwab refers to this as the fourth industrial revolution, a revolution of rapidly accelerating and disruptive technological progress that is fundamentally altering the way we live, work, and interact. How is the fourth industrial revolution affecting engineering? Well, think about transportation. There are numerous major technological advances being developed, such as the proposed Hyperloop between Kansas City and St. Louis, shown on the left side of the slide, or Sidewalk Infrastructure Partners' proposed 40-mile corridor in Michigan for connected autonomous vehicles that is shown on the right side of the slide. The convergence of advances in electric vehicles, autonomous vehicles, and on-demand fleet service has the potential to transform our current systems with major cost savings for consumers, transformative reductions in energy consumption and greenhouse gas emissions, community-changing impacts on land use, and life-saving advances in safety. The impacts on engineering will extend from vehicle design and manufacturing to the challenges of infrastructure planning to the design of all types of transportation infrastructure. There are lots of leading indicators of these disruptions, including investments by Amazon, Waymo, Ford, General Motors, and hundreds of other companies, both startups and established companies. Sidewalk Infrastructure Partners is a spinoff from Google. They are bringing to the table new technologies, strategic partners, and importantly, the capital to create innovative projects. Their leadership is from the financial sector and the tech sector, not from engineering. In energy, advances in battery technology combined with the continuing price drop and efficiency improvements in solar energy will transform the generation, transmission, and distribution of energy, again with positive impacts through lower cost to consumers, improved grid security, lower greenhouse gas emissions, and improved air quality. These developments in energy will make possible more communities like Babcock Ranch in Florida, shown on the slide. Babcock Ranch is the nation's first solar-powered community and was recently named a recipient of a 2021 Edison Award. This winter's polar vortex that wreaked havoc on energy infrastructure across the Midwest will also trigger shifts in thinking about our energy infrastructure. The impacts on engineering will extend from the design and construction of generation and storage facilities to the design and operation of new types of grids incorporating distributed generation and storage, and to increasing the resilience in our energy infrastructure. Over to Amy.
We also live in a world of growing environmental challenges. These include climate change, which we'll delve into a little bit more later, population growth and urbanization, waste management, and impacts to natural resources. Looking at population growth more closely, exponential increases in population have not abated. We are heading from the current global population of about 7.5 billion to 9 billion by the year 2050. And much of this population growth is occurring in cities. Several years ago, we passed a milestone where now more than 50% of people worldwide live in cities, and our urban infrastructure is aging and is stressed by this growth. When you think about waste, Americans produce 1,500 pounds of waste per person each year, and only about 10 to 20% of our plastic is recycled. Mismanaged waste causes environmental degradation, it damages oceans, it creates greenhouse gases, and it costs businesses and municipalities billions of dollars to manage. We'll next look at societal imperatives. The police killing of George Floyd, which sparked the events of last summer, have elevated the need for a more equitable society as another existential challenge. Engineering, like other segments of society, is examining our role in the policies and systems that produce these inequities. The bullet points on the slide represent the engineering-related issues that have contributed to inequities. And these are just examples that, that we can think of, and there's certainly more. And looking at the map here, which illustrates, it's from 1957 and illustrates the recommended expressway system for Omaha, Nebraska, where Mike lives. And the North Expressway, which was built in the 1960s, bisected the predominantly African-American community of North Omaha, while the West Expressway, which would have cut through predominantly white neighborhoods, was never built. And this is a pattern that we see throughout the country, where infrastructure decision-making that was made and is still made is based on, to solve an isolated technical problem, is done without consideration of the community impacts, at best, and at worst displays blatant racism. It is imperative that the engineering community recognize its part in the systemic creation of inequities and change its practices accordingly. So when we reflect on the current state of engineering, where does the engineering community stand during this time of rapid, unprecedented technological change combined with major environmental and societal changes? This is a question that drove me to the Engineering Change Lab. I believe that the engineering community should be at the forefront of applying technology in the most beneficial ways and in using our knowledge and skills to address the challenges that we face. We'd like to get your perspective now on the current state of the engineering industry. And if, as you reflect on this, if you can think about these questions that we've posed, what are or were you thinking when you began your career in engineering? What are you most hopeful about when you reflect on the current state of engineering? And what is most troubling for you? So I'm going to pause for a moment, and if you would share some of your thoughts, we would really be interested to see that.
Amy, maybe while they're thinking, we'll just keep going and show the Engineering Change Lab perspectives that may trigger some thinking.
Sounds good.
You want me to take that, Amy?
Yes, I guess I thought you were going to take this one.
Okay, got it. So one of the interesting and informing aspects of our summits are the perspectives that we hear from our stakeholders regarding the future. And the perspectives that we have heard express both hope and concern. On the hopeful side, we hear a groundswell of interest in positively impacting the future, the belief that engineering can play a vital role in solving future challenges. And we hear the promise of technological advances and an increasing interest in sustainable design. Again, feel free, if you have thoughts, go ahead and put them in there. We'd love to hear it. But we also hear significant perspectives of concerns, lack of diversity in engineering, the fragmentation across the many sectors of engineering, concern about the ability to attract the best and brightest young people into engineering, commoditization, which we often hear about in the private sector practice of engineering, a trend towards short-term project-focused thinking, potential unintended harmful impacts from technology, threats to our licensure system, loss of recognition as leaders in public policy, and concern about ties between engineering and social justice that Amy touched on. So as this uncertain future unfolds, it is clear to those of us who have been involved in Engineering Change Lab that maintaining the status quo is not an option for the engineering community. And this need for change and adaptation is the imperative that drove the formation of Engineering Change Lab. We need to go beyond the traditional role we have as technical experts, which is the main focus of our education, and commit to new roles. We need to add to the long-time obligation to safeguard public health, safety, and welfare with increasing contributions in entrepreneurship, technological stewardship, environmental stewardship, and leadership. Other organizations within the engineering community are also examining the future and confirming this imperative. One of those organizations is the National Academy of Engineering. The National Academy Grand Challenges for Engineering initiative was conceived more than 10 years ago. Its purpose was to inspire engineers and future engineers to play a leading role in addressing the challenges of the future. The initiative frames the needs of the future in these 14 challenges that are centered on 4 main themes: sustainability, health, security, and quality of life. Amy.
Yes, and another of these organizations that is looking to the future is the American Society of Civil Engineers with its Future World Vision project. This is a major undertaking that's based on a similar premise to that of the Engineering Change Lab. Our world and its peoples will be faced with monumental environmental and societal challenges over the next several decades. They are examining these future challenges by looking at the cities of the future. ASCE's initiative is founded on the principle that large-scale change is coming. They assembled a team of cross-disciplinary experts and examined numerous future trends, and they settled on the 6 that are shown here to develop scenarios for these cities of the future. These features that they looked at are alternative energy, climate change, high-tech construction, autonomous vehicles, smart cities, and policy and funding. The cities of the future vision, the future world, are significantly different than today's cities. ASCE's leader of the Future World Vision project, Jerry Buckwalter, described that they concluded that these major changes were inevitable. And the reason, Jerry said, was that it was not the impact of the individual impact of these trends, but the convergence of the cumulative impact of the 6 trends taken together. ASCE is looking to transform civil engineering, and these transformations apply to all of the engineering disciplines. In our discussion of the Future World Vision at an ECL summit, several clear needs for transformation emerged. Climate resilience, planning, and infrastructure design is a necessity. Think of that deep freeze that hit Texas and Oklahoma in February, with more than 4 million homes and businesses that lost power, and many lost water as well. And then we also look at embracing big data and digital models that are transforming engineering design and the construction industry. For example, BIM can use predictive technology from big data to create more sustainable construction by estimating material needs with more precision by analyzing vast quantities of data that look at complex variables. We can improve energy efficiency and reduce material waste. And back to you, Mike.
All right, so in forming a new organization like Engineering Change Lab, the founders recognized the need to establish a vision that clearly articulates our reason for existence. It was our intention that the vision would reflect a total focus on the future of engineering, which we think is unique among the many, many other engineering organizations that are out there. So that vision begins with the challenges of the future and the imperative for the engineering community that we described earlier. And from these come our mission to be a catalyst for change within the engineering community, helping it reach its highest potential on behalf of society. An early decision by the stakeholders of Engineering Change Lab was recognition of the need to focus on the whole system of engineering. And by whole system, we mean the educational system, starting at the K-12 level and including universities. We mean our licensure system, and we mean all forms of the practice of engineering, research, public sector practice, private sector practice, and industry practice. Our list of stakeholders that are following our work has now grown to about 500 and includes representation from all these sectors and from across the company. We are continuing to focus on broadening the breadth and the diversity of our stakeholder group. We have now held 11 summits over the last 4 years. Each of these summits is a deep dive into an issue that will impact the future of engineering. The summits include a combination of learning from thought leaders or provocateurs, along with small group and large group exercises and discussion. Our participants come away with valuable insight that they can take back to their organizations. In addition, we are also serving to connect leaders from across the engineering community. These connections are vital to creating this movement to spur the engineering community to contribute at a higher level. This is the list of strategic topics that we have focused on, and the list continues to grow. And now we want to move into looking at several of these strategic issues in more detail, starting with Amy.
Okay, at a summit last summer, we took a close look at diversity in engineering. The engineering community is not making progress in improving our diversity. According to a National Academy study, women and minorities make up almost 3/4 of the total college-educated workforce, but only about 1/4 of the workforce in engineering-related careers. And of these women that make up this quarter of STEM fields, from your organization's website, we know that only 3% are Latinas. In the graph here, we see the engineering workforce, the percentage of women is about 12%, the lowest of any of the STEM fields. And despite many efforts to increase the number of women and minorities pursuing engineering, we are not making progress. At ECL's virtual summit held last year, we explored this stuckness with respect to women and underrepresented minorities from 4 different viewpoints: our personal leadership skills, our relationships with others, cultural issues in the workplace, and structural systems within our organizations. Our discussions resulted in 10 leverage points for change across all 4 of these viewpoints. And as I review a few of these leverage points, think about what resonates with you. And again, we encourage you to put some thoughts in the chat, and we'd like to hear from you. What inspired you to pursue engineering? What obstacles did you face, or do you continue to face? Looking at some of the leverage points now, we talked about that change begins with addressing biases, many of these unconscious, that drive our behavior, Overcoming these biases will require sustained commitment to personal learning, training, and mentoring. We need to change the perception of engineering and emphasize the potential for engineers to do good in the world. This is vitally important to attracting into the engineering community those young people who place a high value on the purpose of their work. And an interesting statistic that we heard from one of the provocateurs at the summit is that engineering students enter college with a high level of interest in contributing to society, but this interest declines over the course of their education and into their careers. Another point was that underrepresented minority students need educational support and also more basic support as they move through the educational system. And this includes transportation, exposure to workplace opportunities, and consistent Wi-Fi access. A colleague of mine pointed out to me that the cost of PE prep is a career obstacle for many. We need mentoring, we need the workplaces to be equitable and inclusive, and we need recruiting and evaluation practices to shift to eliminate race and gender biases. When we look at the issue of diversity in engineering, we need to grasp the fact that our organizations are missing out on access to the talent and skills of about half of our total population. We will only change this by looking broadly at all components of the problem.
Amy, we did have a comment. For those who have questions, we'll save those to the end, so thank you. But Vanessa said, as I was starting my career, I was concerned with lack of diversity, especially in the Deep South where I'm located. But I am hopeful that this is changing and that I will see the changes in diversity by the time I am wrapping up my career. As I was starting my career, I did not have a good enough understanding of the state of engineering as a whole.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate you bringing that up. Anybody else? And I did see a question here that I think would be timely to raise, and maybe I'll offer it up to Mike. So what curriculum challenges exist in training engineers to responsibly consider the social impacts of their design? And I think of the work that Darshan Karwat has talked about here in considering that question. Mike, any thoughts?
I think that, we're not engineering curriculum experts. We're more experts in the practice of engineering. But what occurs to me is in the practice of engineering is more collaboration with communities that are impacted by our work. And I'm actually going to hit on that toward the end of the presentation. And I think what that speaks to that students need to learn in college is they need to learn, and we need to attract young people into engineering who are interested in the people aspects of the job and in interacting with people. And as much as we can in college, we need our technical courses to include communication regarding the technical things that we're learning, because that is what we will be need to do throughout our career, is communicate technical issues to people who don't necessarily understand them as well as we do, and to listen to people to a greater extent than we have over many decades in making engineering decisions. So I hope that's some useful thoughts on that issue. Thanks for the question. All right, we're going to move on. The impacts of technology on the future of engineering is a frequent topic at our summits. One of the early thought leaders we heard from was from Black and Veatch in Kansas City. And at one of our summits, he challenged us to ramp up our efforts to prepare for the future impacts of technology on engineering. Here's several of the key points that we talked about. The first is awareness of the contrast between innovation, which is doing the same things better, versus disruption, which is making new things that make the old things obsolete. And the disruptions in transportation and energy that I mentioned earlier are examples of this. Second, an awareness that the engineering industry is a target for non-traditional competitors and practitioners like the Google spinoff that I mentioned earlier. And finally, automation. You will see the automation of traditional engineering calculations and engineering activities increase at a dramatic rate throughout your careers. The image on the left side of the screen is an example of all three of these driving forces. This is an AI application that was developed by researchers at the University of Michigan, which is being used to predict which houses in this town in Michigan are most likely to have lead water service lines. So at our virtual summit last summer, and Amy, if you see anything in the chat, let me know, because I'm not seeing anything there or in the questions. So
yeah, I think the chat function may not be taking people's comments, but I invite people to use the questions, which it looks like that does. And if Brianne has any other advice.
Right. All right. So last summer, we focused on the entanglement between new disruptive technologies like those on the slide and the social and environmental systems that these technologies are part of. We are all part of the engineering community, and we are creators and implementers of technology. And as such, we are inextricably woven into this entanglement. So I want to explore that entanglement for these emerging technologies that are impacting our engineering community. And we're going to try a little interaction here, but even if you don't put your thoughts out there to all of us, you can think this through with me, because it's the type of thinking that we're trying to introduce in the engineering community through our work. So imagine that you are a member of a team that is responsible for implementing one of these technologies or for developing the next generation of one of these technologies. So what I want you to do is reflect on the entanglement between a selected technology, just pick one, and reflect on the entanglement between the technology and the social and environmental systems within which it is nested. So choose one of those technologies and, think about it for a minute. And then think about what type of team are you on? Are you in a consulting engineering company? Are you in a construction company? Or are you in industry, like a software developer or a manufacturing firm? So now, if you've got a technology in mind and the type of team that you're a part of, we want you to reflect on this assignment, on implementing this technology. And we want you to try to go deeper in this reflection. We want you to go deeper on thinking about social and political considerations. Who gains, who loses from this technology? And you won't be able to hit all of these, but just anything that might occur to you. We want you to go deeper on environmental and ecological considerations. How are environmental systems affected, either positively or negatively? What environmental and ecological concerns might be likely to get overlooked in the use of this technology? We want you to go deeper on connections and feedback. How are you implementing feedback from stakeholders and data from technology users to modify and improve the design of the implementation process? And how do you decide whose voices are important to consider? And finally, we would ask you to go deeper on personal values. Is there anything that you are doing that is counter to your values or to the values of the people that you are serving? Just pausing a minute to let those sink in. And so if you were in our summit, what we would ask you to do is to come forward and talk about what insights did you gain toward a better outcome for society in taking time to reflect deeper on technology. And we draw these questions from the work of one of our provocateurs, Darshan Karwat from Arizona State University, whose specialty is reflective engineering. And the questions, as I said, are intended to help engineers go deeper in evaluating the social and environmental systems within which technologies are embedded. So when we did this exercise at our summit last year, these are the insights that emerged. First, there's a realization that when you take the time for deeper reflection, it immediately broadens the decision-making process to many other types of considerations, like who are the stakeholders, who are the voices, how can users assist, recognizing the need that you may need to expand your team, recognizing the need for thinking system-wide rather than just on your individual project, and thinking about unintended consequences. Second, self-reflection increases the sense of accountability to do good with the technology. Next, people recognize that engineers often accept the givens that are provided to us by others. We need greater involvement in defining the problems that we're working on. And particularly in the private sector, we are often constrained by budget and schedule, which limits the ability to put time to reflective thinking. And finally, strong public policy is essential in the application of emerging technologies and in prioritizing the investments that we make as a society in infrastructure. The engineering community needs to contribute at a higher level in the development of public policy. So another way to look at this is by considering how the emerging technologies could be best addressed to address the challenges of the 21st century, such as the Michigan researchers did in using AI to identify those lead water service lines. This is the merging of technology with the challenges of the future. And when we do this, we want you to think about questions like, how can we be more entrepreneurial in our thinking rather than continuing to do what we've always done? In creating value propositions with these technologies, who do we need to partner with and who are all of the stakeholders? As stewards of technology and nature, what actions can we take to use emerging technologies to create a higher level of benefit for society? Could there be unintended consequences that are negative? And really, most importantly, as engineers, will our organizations control their future, or will we fall victim to disruptive technologies that are developed and employed by others? All right, let's move on to another topic.
And we do have a question that I'll pause to try to answer. So we had a thoughtful question: how should we Latinas go about applying to internships and scholarships without feeling we are fulfilling a quota? Yeah, that's a good question, and I'll share some thoughts, and then Mike, if you want to add anything. I think that in when you're looking for a job, if you can learn about the organization and what the organization values, and if you feel aligned with their values and that they're conveying a true sense that a diverse workforce is something that the company or organization values, I think that you'll see that. So I would look for that, and that would, I'm not a Latina, but I would trying to think about your perspective. That would give me, and I think about that as a woman, how do I know whether the organization is, I'm one of few women in leadership. Does the organization value that? So, and ask questions about it too. That's what I would encourage when you're having a conversation, whether it's at a career fair or in an interview setting.
Yeah, my answer would be essentially the same as Amy's. Take the time to, as much as you can, research the culture of the organization that you're considering. And do that by, when you're interviewing, ask to talk to multiple employees at multiple levels within that company so you can get a sense of culture. That is so critical, especially in these times when there are limited numbers of minorities that are part of engineering organizations.
Okay, so please do keep any comments and thoughts coming. And I'm going to turn now to climate change, which was the topic of the ECL Summit 11 that was held in March. And I was one of the people that helped to organize this, and I thought it was really a fabulous discussion that we had virtually with a good number of attendees. I think this might have been our, I'm sure Mike would know for sure, but our best attended virtual summit. So it featured a deep dive into how engineering, is that right, Mike?
Yes, that's correct, yes.
Yeah, how engineering and the engineering community can contribute to the challenge of climate change. And we used the state of California as a case study. Participants explored the roles of the engineering community within and across the private sector, public sector, and nonprofit sector to catalyze action related to California's aggressive climate change goals. Key points from our discussion at the summit highlighted major contributions that are needed from the engineering community and success factors that can drive these contributions. And I'll talk about a few of examples of the needs for the engineering community that we discussed. We should coalesce around a common climate vision for the engineering community. We talked about transformation of engineering education to emphasize sustainability and climate action. And I think here of how closely those issues are also tied to social inequity. That this transformation of education can address systems thinking, public and stakeholder engagement, and the need for multidisciplinary pathways in our education, as well as collaboration among disciplines in engineering and outside of engineering. We also talked about how the focus on racial and environmental equity in a transition of the energy system is so important, and how helping underserved communities enhance their resilience to climate change impacts. And I think here of the disparate impact that climate change has, and especially when you look at extreme flooding events and how the underserved communities are often the worst impacted by those events. So if you have thoughts.
If I could insert, Amy, this one always jumps out to me. I like the need to develop the trusted Dr. Fauci-like spokespersons on behalf of the engineering community. People who are really trusted by society at large, like I think Dr. Fauci is.
Yes, where they're looked to for solutions and as a leading voice on this issue.
Right.
So if you have any thoughts that you'd like to share with respect to climate change, or any interest in work that you hope to do on projects related to climate change, again, thoughts or questions related to this topic, we would invite those. So additional work at this same summit was a final exercise. In a final exercise, participants reflected on the potential emergence of a noble purpose or a common vision for the engineering community that centered on this climate change imperative. Participants embraced this concept and developed a dozen different initial drafts of a noble purpose statement. And you can read elements of the early drafts that incorporated ideas around economics, innovation, energy, social and environmental issues. Some of the summit participants and representatives from multiple engineering societies and organizations committed to continue the discussion. And we held our first working group actually earlier this week. We see that we have the potential to fill a gap in the lack of a multi-sector vision for the engineering community regarding climate change. We're considering as one model the American Institute of Architects, which put forth a climate stance in 2019. And this is called the Resolution for Urgent and Sustained Climate Action. And that organization is refocusing much of its mission in support of their climate stance. So far, ECL has 11 broad engineering organizations that are participating in this effort, and we are inviting everybody that may have interest to join us in working to not only to put together this noble purpose statement for engineering, but also to, as we make progress, to agree to promote it and to sign on to it. Our goal is an action statement that organizations and individuals can sign on to and embrace, and then take action in support of this vision. So next I'll turn it back to Mike.
All right, and we're going to begin to move into our wrap up here with some of our overall takeaways. And my overall key takeaway from the work of Engineering Change Lab is that clearly engineers of the future, people like all of you, are going to need to master new types of leadership skills. The challenges of the 21st century reinforce the need for engineering leadership. The engineers of the future will need to master systems thinking, which is an understanding of impacts of our work beyond the traditional limits of construction of a project to community-wide impacts, social impacts, ecosystem impacts, climate impacts, and life cycle impacts. We need to master macro-ethical thinking, which is really another way of expressing the need for systems thinking. A 1984 quote I heard from Ove Arup, who's the founder of the global design firm Arup, illustrates this principle. What we decide to do is much more important than how we do it. We need to master interdisciplinary collaboration with other engineering disciplines, with experts in new construction techniques and advanced materials, with non-engineering disciplines, with regulators, and with educators and researchers. We need to be inclusive, ensuring that our engineering organizations are diverse and open to underrepresented voices. We need to master stakeholder collaboration, learning through practicing listening skills that allow us to understand and appreciate the impacts of our work on people, using communication skills and new technologies that allow us to clearly articulate technical issues in understandable, believable words, stories, and images. We need to master polarity management, which is an openness to both sides of issues, along with the skill to incorporate both and thinking that captures the best aspects of alternative approaches while minimizing the downsides. And finally, we need to master public policy leadership, understanding the impacts of policy and funding on our work and our ability to do the right projects, and contributing to change through high-level advisory work, through advocacy, and through service, either appointed or elected. So what will be the future of engineering? What technological disruptors will have the greatest impacts? What other trends could be disruptive? What role will our organizations play as stewards of technology and stewards of the environment? How will our organizations impact public policy? Is the engineering educational system supporting or hindering our future? What are the potential impacts from threats to our licensure system? And finally, the question for all of us, what will we do to protect the future of the engineering community? The role of Engineering Change Lab is to be a change agent and a connector and prepare more engineers and more engineering organizations to look at the future through addressing these questions. We invite you to become involved in our learning and our work. That involvement can range from being a stakeholder and just following our work to participating in our events. And I've listed our upcoming events on the screen. The only requirement for engagement is to be interested in the future of engineering. And if our work intrigues you, go ahead and put your email in the chat, or you can email me later, and we would love to add you to our stakeholders list and have your voices be heard in our work. So I strongly believe in the mission of Engineering Change Lab. I'm also very, very aware that we're a small fish in a big pond. But in the words of Margaret Mead, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens from the engineering community can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. Thank you very much, and we've got time, I think, for a few more questions.
And I do see that somebody has put, Vanessa put her email forward, so thank you for that. And Mike will add you to his contact list.
I'm getting it down, Vanessa, thank you.
Anybody have any questions or any comments? I enjoyed being with you virtually and to share our work. And I hope some of you will look into the organization further.
All right, well, if there's nothing else, we thank you again. Feel free to sign off. Can't hear you, Brianne.
Thank
I think
you.
you're muted.
Yeah.
There.
There you go.
No, thank you, Mike and Amy, for sharing so much. We even got in the chat. Thank you for your time and insights. This was incredibly helpful. You said to think at a large scale, but also in the very tactical pieces, and to learn of all of the initiatives and research already happening. So again, thank you, Ship Familia, for joining. Again, thank you, Familia, for all the warm welcomes and for participating here tonight. Again, it was a great pleasure to witness so much valuable information and knowledge from you both. As for a reminder for the Ship Familia, next month we are bringing you Your Future in Cybersecurity, which is a two-part webinar series about journey careers and degree paths. Again, check in to hear from panelists that explore different areas of cybersecurity, including investigation, security, software development, and operations. So if you're considering a job in cybersecurity, come learn about the abundant opportunities. Please remember to take our survey, Ship Familia. Again, Mike and Amy did a wonderful job of preparing. We'd love to see how helpful this was and what you learned. If you're interested in more of these type of subjects, maybe we can bring Amy and Mike back again to talk a little more. But again, please let us know. And again, this recording will be on the YouTube channel. So if you came in a little late or had to leave a little early, with that, I will take it, wish everyone a wonderful night and hope you all have a wonderful evening. Thanks, everyone.
All right.
Take care, everyone.